Hello, people. Welcome back to another session with me and Helios. And
Hello,
today
everyone.
we're going to be talking about an upcoming workshop that is going to be held by Helios just ahead of his course on Hegel and the mechanistic worldview. And this is going to be a workshop on, tell us, Helios.
Well, it's going to be a workshop on Hegel and Newton. And the
Very,
aim of the workshop will be just to create some dialogue, maybe put out some thought-provoking questions on the relationship between Hegel and Newton. Um, People often pit Hegel and Newton against each other. We're talking about whether that's fair, whether there are actually more similarities than differences. And we'll just be thinking about some of the broad questions that sort of um, categor not categorize that represent their relationship.
yeah.
Um,
Newton worked out his theory of the world using mathematics
mhm.
and empirical observations, right? Empirical data. And it's very much an a posteriori account, whereas Hegel has an a priori dialectical method of deriving ideas and working things out. So what would you say is kind of like the main difference between their conceptions of nature?
So I think the way you frame the question is the way people have typically framed this question, uh, and it's always as an opposition
Hmm.
between philosophy and science. And so for a long time, this kind of framing is what made sort of the philosophy of nature, Hegel's second text of the encyclopedia, um, sort of considered to be a very stupid text, to put it simply.
City text.
Yeah, a silly text. Um, but once people started realizing that Hegel wasn't pitting science against philosophy, uh, it was, and actually Hegel was actually very good on his science. That's one of the big sort of turning points in research in the 80s and 70s, that Hegel actually knew his science really well.
Oh yeah,
And
of his day.
of his day, of course, yeah, and his mathematics. People started realizing that what actually Hegel was doing was, while sometimes critiquing the scientific theories of his day, always doing so through the prism of conceptual analysis. Um, so, do Hegel and Newton have opposing worldviews? Well, that question doesn't really make sense because Newton's a scientist and Hegel's a philosopher. So, obviously, a scientist is going to engage with reality through observations and experiments, and um, and yeah, he'll use mathematics to sort of make sense of everything and sort of structure it into a coherent whole. Um, but he's not. That's what science does. Science doesn't do this whole conceptual analysis, conceptual development as a way of understanding the world. Um, what you can say is they mutually enrich each other
Mhm.
because Hegel, for example, will praise Newton for what he's done because what he did helped to bring science forward. And this is a bit of a tangent on Hegel's philosophy, but very briefly, Hegel does think it's important that history has developed to a certain point. It's important that there are these thinkers that help to develop fields of thought. So what Newton did was important because he introduced the concept, of I don't know, action and reaction or laws, gravitation, these things. Now, did Newton have a perfect grasp of the conceptual background that he was working with? Maybe not. That's where Hegel comes in. That's where Hegel's analysis of these concepts matters, and there might be conflict with Newton. Um, but again, it's not the kind of conflict of philosophy versus science. There's a kind of conflict of philosophy trying to make science slightly more conceptually rigorous, whilst also benefiting from the empirical observations that science has made by informing philosophy about the real world.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's a huge question, obviously, and that's something that we're gonna look at in the workshop. Um, but there are lots of other different kinds of questions, more specific ones as well, about Hegel and Newton. You know, about the conceptions of space and time, or how they think about gravity, or
What do you
as
think about
some
force?
how they think about force. That's a huge one. Yeah, my God, the phenomenology of spirit, the doctrine of essence, all those places. Yeah. So it's not a clear-cut oppositional relationship. And I think people might come to the workshop thinking this, oh, science versus philosophy, you know, uh, Richard Dawkins versus God, that kind of stuff. Uh, but it's actually a much more nuanced relationship,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna that's what I'm gonna try to bring out in the workshop.
Yeah. And another question that one might ask is that they both saw reason at work in nature.
Mm,
Nature isn't doing random shit and or spontaneous shit. We are the ones who do that, right? We have weird ideas and weird appetites. But nature really is bound by laws, and by understanding those laws, we can understand what's happening in nature, right? That's
mm,
the supposition that Newton comes in with, right? He doesn't critique those ideas. He has to have them in order to do the things he does. And so what Hegel does is kind of take a step back and try to analyze the basic framework that any scientist has to take for granted.
exactly.
As
Yeah,
you were saying, they mutually benefit from each other's explorations.
that's right. Exactly. I mean, Hegel would have had no idea of gravity if Newton had never existed, assuming no one else then discovered it. But you know,
Yeah.
and gravity is an important concept for Hegel. You know, it plays an important role in the philosophy of nature. Um, so exactly.
But then shit get really kooky once we get into, modern physics, where you've got space-time and quantum realm and observer's paradox and things like that, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but if anything, that reveals to us is that our categories of nature were too static, too
Mm,
too immobile. We needed, if anything, wilder ideas about how being works, what is possible in being.
mm.
And where do you find that? But in philosophy, especially in Hegel,
Especially in
where
Hegel. Yeah.
being is nothing and nothing is being. Like, what's going on there, right?
Yep.
How is this becoming? Uh,
Absolutely.
if nothing else, then Hegel gives us really like a insane mental exercise, right? Through our teaching our ideas or our minds to do multiple backflips at a time, right? In terms of it's a way of thinking.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Something I've always wanted to do actually is do a bit of modern science with Hegel. That's a very challenging workshop to do, to organize.
Very, very challenging. Zizek is not afraid to make remarks on that score.
Hmm. Yeah, he loves to talk about his quantum realm and Hegel stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
My kiekjes. It's simply that. Well, if you're interested in Zizek or in modern physics, then this is going to be an interesting workshop for you, I think, because if you're coming from the angle of science or philosophy of science, or if you're coming from the Zizekian realm, you still need to understand the grounding texts, which is here in Hegel's logic, which is kind of like what this workshop is going to be motivating us to get into.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, please come along. It'll be free for everyone to join, and hopefully we get a nice big group and we can have an interesting discussion after my presentation. That's the idea, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, hope to see you there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you there. Bring tons of questions and we'll have a good old time debating, hashing it out.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you and bye bye.